Greetings programs and welcome back to World of Warships and a game of mine in the Yoshino B, which if I had to pick a favourite tier 10 anything, this would at least be a contender. I don't know if it's the one I'd pick, but certainly of all the tier 10 large cruisers it's the one I enjoy playing the most. I quite like the Azuma at tier 9 as well, it's just the torpedoes give this an extra bit of utility. And these days you don't have to worry about those 20 kilometres that Torp's giving you the unexpected chance to turn pink, at least, although you still have to be a bit careful about how and where and when you use them. So this is an epicenter game, and this is actually going to end up being a really defensive game, which kind of suits the playstyle of the Yoshino. It doesn't have a super fast rate of fire or anything, it's not super duper tanky, especially compared to some of the other super cruisers, although it's still reasonably well armoured. But yeah, it definitely is served best by playing at medium to long ranges and trying to use your HE. The AP is still decent, but it's not like it's the Alaska or what's the tier 10 US, I can't even remember, but you know, even things like the Des Moines, that super heavy US AP is kind of the go-to. And for some of the other ships as well, I mean the Russians are served very, very well by predominantly using their AP shells also, but this is really all about the high explosive, although I do occasionally try and use the AP in this one, as you'll see. The only other supercruiser, incidentally, at tier 10 that I kind of like, and it's quite a similar playstyle, although it's not about setting fires, is the Venezia. Of course, it can't set fires except with its secondaries, so yeah, that's more about those heavy SAP broadsides. And again, sometimes you can use the AP shells, but the SAP is your go-to in that ship. Anyway, this flank not looking all that great. We lost a battleship here already. We're losing control of the mid as well. We've got a semi-awkward cluster to the northwest. In fact, this entire game is going to be very awkward, and it's not one that well, you'll see how it works out, but for a long time it's not one that I expected us to even really have any chance of winning, let alone how it actually did work out. I'm definitely conscious of not wanting to take too much fire here, though. I mean, we're fairly early in the game. We're only just about at the 5-minute mark, and so I'm trying to get I'm trying to avoid being focused too heavily, but I'm also still trying to do some damage, so I'm not going completely dark. Trying to get a fire on the Sovietsky Soyuz is probably not the most optimal thing I could be doing right now, but he's also just about the only thing in range, so what else am I going to do really? I could try and get a bit closer and hit some of those other targets maybe, but I'd have to go dark and then turn around and re-engage, and that would all take time. So instead I'm just firing away at the Sovietsky Soyuz while I can, although he does seem to be trying to fire back at me, which is very unsporting. You can see the range on this is pretty decent, but you kind of need that range because it's not especially manoeuvrable. So there we go, another fire, and he pops one of his limited use DCPs. So if I was to get another one, that would be quite nice, but of course they reload quite quickly, and there's every chance they would burn another one. Although if they were sensible and it was a single fire, they would just let it go, because we've already seen they just let one fire burn for a bit of damage. So one of the tricky things about playing any ship that has got those limited DCPs, the Russian battleships, and of course now the German battle cruisers as well, you have to juggle your use of both the heal and the DCP quite carefully, and there are situations where in other battleships you would shrug and pop a heal instead of using the DCP. Sometimes you have to use the DCP instead, because otherwise you're going to be using, I mean, because generally speaking you've got one less heal anyway, so you're going to be burning heals quicker than you would want to in other battleships and would want to otherwise. Z46 is playing a slightly dangerous game. They might actually be in radar range of various things there, although it's hard to tell, but they're hopefully slowing the enemy ships down and keeping them all on the hop a little bit. There's also an enemy Grozhevoy there, as we've just found out, but they are probably not going to be stealthier than the Z46, so the Z46 should be okay, but I think they've just been radared because they're now getting shot at, so yeah, they needed to put a bit more distance between themselves and those enemy ships, which unfortunately they weren't able to do. And you have a Tashkent here even also, and you know, not the most stealthy ship either, but maybe they can do something. And there goes the Edinburgh, who was in their smoke, and I'm just dropping more torps downrange at this point because why not? I'm also a little bit broadside here, although they're not really looking at me right now. They're looking at the Tashkent for the most part, but I shouldn't push my luck, and I am starting to turn away a bit now. There is some argument to be made sometimes of trying to make yourself a more attractive, there we go, that's the word I'm looking for. My brain is really firing on all cylinders today. Yeah, sometimes trying to make yourself a more attractive target to get enemies to fire at you instead, but that's a much harder thing to do in World of Warships than it is in other games where you can try and make yourself the attractive target, because people can just choose to ignore you, whereas in World of Tanks, for instance, you can actively place yourself between an enemy and an ally that might be low health, and you can't really do that in World of Warships. Look at the points, by the way. This is not looking good. We've reached the stage where I was thinking I'm just going to try and get as much damage as I can. Surely this is surely there's no way we're going to come back from this. I mean, it's not a totally insurmountable lead, but that's over 500 points. The enemy team would have to throw this pretty hard. We're also down on ships compared to them, only by a couple, but we've lost our destroyers at this stage. We've got a strong enemy push coming around that flank, and there's one or two ships in the middle there, and in fact we do have the incomparable in this game, being driven by, I presume, a super tester. I didn't really get to see them up close. And maybe this game is almost more noteworthy for the incomparable being here than anything I did. But yeah, the incomparable player was certainly one of the more valuable players on the team in terms of their overall contributions. So yeah, it's almost a pity I didn't get to take a closer look at that. I don't know if I was even really close enough to fly over and have a bird's eye view. Not that I could do that now. I think this is a last patch replay at this point, but anyway, it would have been maybe interesting to see the gameplay from their point of view. Not that that player would have actually been able to show that replay without breaking NDA, of course, so yeah. Anyway, yeah, they're providing a bit of distraction, but they're having to withdraw because they can only withstand so much punishment. Otherwise, it's basically me and the Jean Bar on this flank, although we've just about caught up to that Alaska there as well. And yeah, really, it's just the enemy teams to lose at this point. I mean, they almost don't even have to push, they can just keep blocking, and in fact, that would probably be the smarter move. But what they are doing is continuing to push. They are continuing to expose themselves, and this is going to be one of those times when a team, in this case the enemy team, just wants to win harder. They're about 150 points away from victory. They have all of the caps. They have ticking score because they're actually getting score from the middle cap. The outer cap is uncontested, and we very briefly were able to cap the middle cap, but that's now uncontested as well. So they just have to sit tight and they can win this. But no, they have to win harder. So the Sovietsky Soyuz goes down. That buys us some points and some time. The Grozhevoy decides they're just going to sit in the open and start pew-pewing, which is a bit cheeky. And okay, I don't have the best rate of fire, but this HE is still fairly nasty. And I think the Grozhevoy does get a heal, but destroyer heals tend to be fairly limited. So it's not something you would particularly want to rely on as a crutch. So So I've decided that sitting still and shooting at the thing with the large high explosive shells might not be the best idea, so they're starting to move around a bit. And myself and the Alaska have now basically linked up with our remaining allies. There's still not that, you know, much in terms of, like, we don't have to lose much in order to just straight up lose, but we've managed to get another kill. That's a Cleveland that's now down. That Gorozovoy is not looking particularly healthy. And there goes the Gorozovoy to the Petro, so that's even more points and time that we've bought ourselves. Yeah, this is turning into a throw. Now, I won't say this was entirely the enemy team's fault. Like I said, they could have just sat back and played it safe, and they would have won. It would have put the onus on us to come and get them to get the points. But there are some players in our team. I mean, I'm almost at 100k myself, which is not terrible. It's not amazing for being in a tier 10 cruiser, but there are some players in our team who fought very, very hard and very, very well. And so, you know, it's not like I can say, oh yeah, the enemy team just lost this and it's all their fault. No, some players on our team were definitely doing things to try, you know, doing their utmost to try and make this a win, and were therefore able to take advantage of the enemy team blundering as they were. And they're now down to only 4 ships. But they're also up to 900 points. So with the ships they've been losing, you know, they've been steadily resetting that timer. We actually haven't lost a ship now, I think, in a couple of minutes. So now down to 3 enemy ships. We now outnumber them 2-1. This might start to be doable. We've only got 6 minutes left on the timer, and just this Lepanto at least is realising that, oh yeah, maybe I should stop pushing at this point when we're so close to winning. I'm sure there were people in the enemy team chat that were shouting at these remaining ships to pull back, and probably have been shouting at them for several minutes in order to try and salvage this determined attempt at this point to throw the game. But yeah, it's all a little bit too late. I've decided to turn around and be a bit more aggressive myself now. And to be honest, this was maybe a questionable decision because yeah, I've landed some nice torpedo damage there on that Yamato, but they're still at 900 points. We can't really afford to lose many ships. So I think this was myself, arguably being a little silly here, given that both of these ships are now looking firmly in my direction, and one of them's a Yamato. Well, I'm getting a little lucky here with them not hitting me as hard as they could have. I'm also playing with my speed and course as much as I can. Not trying to drop any more torpedoes, because that would definitely be a rather fatal mistake. But yeah, these ships are now both quite low. And it'd probably help if I could pick one to just focus on over the other. The Lepanto is lower health, so yeah, if we can get them down, that will just leave the Yamato. But there's always that siren call of the Yamato's citadel cheek. So yeah. Anyway, there we go, down to 800 points now. We've got control of all of the caps, and it's just the Yamato left. And yeah, there's probably some quite frustrated players on the enemy team. We're kind of past the danger zone now. If I die, it's not going to immediately doom us. The Jean Bar turned around and is now also putting fire into this Yamato. So yeah, it's not going to be enough points if I do die. So it was a risky move, and I think there was more urgency in my head at the point where I turned around than there actually was. But that's one of those things you can always look at things back in hindsight and go, oh yeah, maybe I didn't need to turn around and push in and close the distance. Maybe I should have just kept my distance and kept playing a bit more defensively. But fortunately for me, it's not going to affect the game whether I get sunk or not. Down south, well, that last surviving enemy cruiser has just been, there we go, taken out by the incomparable. That was a Kraken for the incomparable? Well, it would have been if the incomparable wasn't a test chip and therefore couldn't get achievements. But yeah, that just goes to show you how well that player was actually playing. I think it was only really when I got to this stage of the battle that I realised that, oh yeah, that isn't incomparable. So there goes the Yamato, and that was my only kill, but still 168k damage was not terrible at the end, even though my decision to turn around was maybe a little questionable, but definitely the hero of this game was that incomparable player. 5 kills, and see there, the Alaska B did almost as well score-wise, 3 kills, 2.2k, nearly 2.3k, and the incomparable just over 2.3k. So there we go. Another point, in fact. Not quite a pointy, but a point nonetheless. So yeah, that was a fairly decent game, and it was just a mix of the enemy team pushing way too hard, trying to win harder, that classic mistake, and also the last numbers of our team doing the right thing, playing smart when it came to the enemy team making those moves. Everyone that was around at that point pretty much kept their heads and was able to then take care of those enemy team remnants who had decided that, you know, overconfidence is good and we must now all push in, because anyone that doesn't is a coward. Clearly, we need to win harder. We must always try and win harder, and that's what wins games, and it definitely doesn't turn winning situations into losing ones at all. No. Anyway, so if there's any lesson you can take from this replay, it would be that, I suppose. Sometimes if you've won, that's enough. You don't need to keep pushing. You don't need to win harder. Anyway, that's it for this replay. Hopefully you have enjoyed it, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath the video, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.